Okay, trying to speed things up here. I've gone through the entire trading phase, I think. We actually saw a promissory note get closed out up there. Collected up a pile of cash for it, but we also saw new ones showing up. I think this guy picked one up again. It feels like we're kind of close to the end, but then when you start to look, people have a lot of flags, there's a lot of empty spaces, and there's still a decent number of tiles. 5 tiles that would have to go. 2 black, 2 white, and a yellow. I'm not counting these purples. The way the board looks right now, it looks really hard to make money off these purples. If maybe by moving tiles it would work, but you know, for example, setting up like this, that would be 15, and remember it costs an extra black to move a tile. That would be 15 bucks that it could produce for 2 food and a water. 15 bucks per hex. So, you know, most of the production that's out there works better than that. Obviously not the food and the labor, but the other stuff generates better than 15 bucks per space. If you can get that synergy going with 3 spaces, with you know, 3 of these together circling in, well, then you have a little bit more value, because they produce, what, 30 bucks for each that you run. So you'd be looking at 30 bucks a space here instead of just the 15 bucks a space that 2 of them, which is all we can have right now, would produce. That thing makes it even more interesting if you buy it, but it's double the cost. It makes a good central point to setting up these banking links. But again, there's a lot of, you got to spend a lot to get that, and right now that doesn't look very valuable. So I don't think the purples have any chance of wiping out. On the other hand, the others, well, if nobody's buying purples, they're going to buy the others and run them, I think. Alright, we'll come back and see what gets produced. Well, it turns out I sort of lied. There aren't enough white tiles to make money off them. We're down to 1. I don't know who bought one. Ah, he did. That's kind of a tricky situation, because by doing that, it's been turned into, okay, great. If there are no places to lay the second white tile, if I can only lay 1 white tile, then I have to play a blue and a yellow to produce with it, and that's not going to make money. A little bit of a hit for this guy, but he's playing a purple tile instead. And the whites may actually not run out, because their value is just not good enough to justify a single tile. Somebody may buy it to end the game, though, so we'll see about that. I mean, for example, this guy over here may feel he's far enough ahead that buying a white tile later to end things would make most sense. Another option would have been to build a yellow farm, but that's not worth it. You got to pay an energy for that. If you don't already have farms, it's not worth expanding to them at this point in the game. The farm money is just too crappy. So anyway, that's where we're at. Making money peacefully has gotten so difficult. We're seeing a spate of militarization. The white occupation army there was attacked. They stood still rather than moving into another occupation location, in part to prevent this green army from marching in on them. They wanted to hold on to food so that they could conduct an attack. Well, this guy's got tons of food, so he just moved up, marched up, and grabbed one of this guy's white territories, figuring that's almost as good as one of this guy's black. This guy's going to probably move forward. He probably can't grab a black, because then this sector simply won't get run, but he's really hosing over this poor guy. He's got red or this color moved in on him to threaten the black sectors. Now here, this guy over here, the federal provinces, marched in with a couple of armies, grabbed a blue. Now we're seeing an action to defeat one of those. But there's so much food, food's so cheap, that once you have armies, it's very easy to move them around. And there's so much food floating around because he, was selling, oh yeah, I'll give you 5 food for a cube, and that worked out pretty well. All right, so that was this fellow. Now he's got the next action and is going to also charge into here, opening things up. Now, after he does that, here comes the question: does he want to spend another food to grab a black? Kind of depends on whether there was any kind of deal. I'm assuming there was some kind of deal cut there with that die roll. And I think the armies are pretty much done. The only exception is this here orange one could move a couple of spaces and grab a blue. And for 2 yellows, a blue seems like a good deal. Whether or not he's going to get it is a different question, but one can assume. Let's see, did anybody else have food left? He does, but he's not doing anything. He does. And there's not a lot he could grab, but for 2 food, after he moves, we could slide forward and grab one of his fuel. That puts it on him. There's not much he can do about this. And now I'm marching. Just a tremendous violence that really is going to cut productivity in a sense, but really it kind of shifts it. The only people who are really hurt are those who don't have armies placed somewhere. So for example, he's gaining a black but losing a blue. He's gaining a blue and losing a blue, so it ended up neutral for him. He's going to gain. He's going to gain. This poor guy, though, is hosed by it. He lost the war. All right. Well, I think that's it for development, and now we'll go on to the production and see what that all kind of works out as. I can also buy off some of these cubes that I have dice for. And this guy's still got 6, but he's going to be using them in production, so I'm going to leave them as a number for now. Well, all that activity definitely caused significant effects on the productivity. So this guy didn't run his black because half of it would have gone to him. The cost would have been 23, 22, whatever in terms of payout with the blue and the yellow to get more money, but he would have given just as much to someone else. And he said, you know, the hell with that. No, I'm not doing it. He got away scot-free. And the whites, of course, produced because that's industrialized. He made a huge amount of white cubes off that. He probably made a mistake with not producing the black ones. If it had been someone not winning the game, but I feel this guy is one of the 2 people who's doing the best, I probably would have let him tag along for the return, getting the much larger share of the points. But likewise, this guy didn't run his blues. In fact, he had some issues with what he had on the board. He couldn't run everything anyway. He could only run 4 of his reds. Now, blues are more valuable than reds, but he produced more with the reds, and he didn't have to give one away. So it clearly made sense, which means a lot of this military activity actually failed to do anything. This didn't get run, I believe. Maybe it did. That one may have gotten run. Anyway. Also, the responses, the fact that people had to pull into their reserves that they were planning on producing with, caused problems. This is one of the iffy things. So he produces like 21 farm produce, okay? Only slightly more than what he could sell a blue for. But on the open market, he might be able to trade these at a little higher. They're worth 1.5 supposedly. And no one else has them. So other people will have to pay 2, maybe 3, maybe more if they buy from the market. So he can probably get his 1.5, maybe even a little bit more than that for each one, which makes it quite valuable what he's expanding. We can see this wasn't the only bank tile placed. Again, same reason. Can't place 2 of these. Well, One that only produces one, just, it's not worth the cash. It's only, it's about the break-even point right now. And that's with food being worth nothing. But anyway, we'll move to that next turn. I'm very, very bad at this. Spending all my money and leaving my promissory note. It's very easy in a deal to say, oh yeah, a couple bucks more for that. Yeah, I have that. I have that money in my pocket. And then just having to pick up, that extra, really significant penalty, because you're paying $5 in interest at the end to pay it off, or it's worth 3 victory points, which you really don't want to do. Or, in addition, you're paying $1 per turn for it. So, borrowing that money is painful, and to do it accidentally like this, and I could see myself doing it opposed quite often too. Anyway, I gotta pay those interests. First trade of the turn was a hard decision. This guy needed about 9 food, or 3 food and a white cube, but 9 food at the current prices is worth less than one of those white cubes. So he goes to this guy and says, hey, I'll try to give you a balanced price for it. And the food producer says no. Because if you buy these up, the balanced prices for everyone else are going up. I want more. Your 1 blue cube is supposedly worth 17. My 9 food is worth less, but, I think they're a fair deal. And actually they are. When you start hitting the bottom of the market here, the fluctuations go up quite a bit after a few purchases. So I think he could have offered more than that. I think this 1.5 is kind of bullshit, actually, because the other guy is going to be paying very quickly rising prices. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that sometimes those don't reflect the situation very well at all. Another thing which has really lost value are red cubes. Now, they're important for building just about everything because of the flagging, and seemed like a valuable choice early on. But they're not just because the market values dropped, but people have flags where they want them. So this guy actually can't get his flag out. He's stuck at that tiny size. He will never get any bigger, because he's been surrounded. He can walk over and capture somebody. The only exception is if somebody moves one of their territories out from next to him, which I don't think is going to happen. Nobody would want to do that particularly. If he put his military on them, they would probably build a military and attack it. That's cheaper. So yeah, I mean, one of the things is flagging is expensive. So the only other thing you'd want these red cubes for, there's a couple things that require them for building, white and black tiles, but there's only one of each of those left. And you'd also want them for building armies. But you don't have to buy a lot of them for that. One of the deals is that you want something that people want regularly. That's what makes the food reasonable, is you still do want it. But these red cubes, people aren't really too interested in them anymore. So it's hard to get somebody to agree to a deal because they don't want a slightly better price, or to pay slightly more than they would pay to sell it, than they would get to sell it. So they don't want a commodity that they don't want, that no one else wants, because it's just got really no value on the market. A little bit of cleverness though on this guy's part. He's got stuff he doesn't want anything really that other people have. He needs a blue and some food, 3 food, or a white. Very, very hard to make a deal with the things he has, which are all very valuable. So he's putting up an offer of, I've got a black and a promissory note. What do you give me for it? cash, at least $5. Is that fair? I don't know. $25 for the promissory, that puts it up to 30. He's making a little bit here, and the other person's probably coming out a little ahead. Well, the other person's probably coming out more ahead. Well, red says, hey, I got a red cube instead of the $5. He's okay on that. Now the question is, maybe food would be more valuable. We'll see what the bidding goes to, but I don't think that red cube's going to get beaten. Without the ability to grow here, and without finding markets that were pairing up nicely, even after retiring his couple of promissory notes, he turned in with a sale. He made 70-something bucks off of 2 blacks and a white selling directly to the market. So for the first time, we're seeing someone piling up money at this point. He's got nothing he can do with it. He can build armies, you know, and he can run his plan. But remember, those are worth, every 10 bucks is worth a victory point. So collecting 70-something bucks is of some value here. That's 7 quick victory points he's gotten, plus he's gotten rid of 2 promissory notes. So in this very turn, he's gotten 13 victory points. He hasn't been able to produce any all game, basically, since his initial starting. So it's kind of nice to see him moving somewhere. I don't think he's got a chance, but he's becoming flush in cash. Of course, if these banks get started, they're also going to be putting straight cash into the market, almost making the commodities worth less, because the cash tightness has made trading a more valuable aspect. Now people will simply be saying, yeah, I'll give you money for that. More, I think. Beginning to hit a kind of interesting point in the game where the price of food has started to climb. People have been buying it from the market because he hasn't been selling it as happily. And, well, not in huge quantities, but now its value has gone up. He's willing to deal with some people, but now food is becoming an interesting commodity for this guy. He doesn't have, I just took his turn. He doesn't have the ability to shift to producing food this turn without, you know, really destabilizing. Like, he'd have to create a promissory note to do it. And other people have been retiring their promissory notes. This guy dropped 2 back in the bank, I think. And this guy got rid of the one that he was using. Picking up that promissory note would mean producing 1, because I need a blue, 1, 2, 3, 4 food, which still isn't necessarily even worth what a blue is. So it's still kind of, you know, the prices are low enough that it's not a big deal. But his monopoly is beginning to work. Now that he's driven everybody out of the market because the prices have gotten low enough, people are willing to buy it at reasonable prices again. The trading far and away is the longest period in each turn for me, because especially solitaire, having to figure out what I need for each person each time. And yes, I kind of keep track of it, but I think it's going to be the longest period even in a multiplayer game with the ordering of it. But now we're moving on to the development phase, and we'll start building what people need. Over here, he's going to open up. It looks like the question is, does he want to do things with his armies first? I don't think so. You generally don't want to get your armies moving first. But he's going to open up with the first completed bank. And I think he's set up to run that as well. He needs 2 food for it, which is going to produce. So actually, it doesn't produce that much. You know, the water or the energy that he used is 19. The food, it's only going to produce a few bucks of extra cash, and many of these markets have settled into a place where people are barely making money off of. Whereas some others have clear value. The blacks, for example, this is why I'm not counting him out of it, is because that's scored so well throughout the game that he's got into that big money position. But I think other people are, clear. So he's free in a way with all these farms. That's worth a fortune, way more than the $7. So as long as this doesn't start escalating, and I don't think it will, I don't think that he has any real shot. We're seeing a significant militarization taking place again. This guy building up to destroy the enemy on his land. The Bolsheviks doing the same here. We actually saw these guys with the factories building more armies because there's not much else they have to improve their lot but going conquering people. But here we have an interesting situation. All these tons of food give me a flexibility that other people don't have. I withdraw from the combat. Now, here's the thing. That's no big deal, and I might not do that, but for the fact that I have a ton more food. I can outwait if and when he plays his food and then move it and take there. Likewise, I can do the same if this guy uses up his food. So by having these larger stockpiles of food, I maintain a certain flexibility in my military stance. I had a brief scare that I was doing everything wrong. This is indeed a block because they share part of a dot, even if the whole dot's not created. And I was terrified that, hey, if I didn't make a whole dot, because I don't know how how these developed and everything, whether or not at what point they started being whole dots and what kind of effect that is. That would have complicated things tremendously. So we see the outcome of the military taking place right now. Basically, this guy placed his last thing here. We went completely around. He chose not to withdraw. He's going to fire off using a food to make his attacks. Now, his attacks are kind of a problem. If he moves into here, he knows he has food. So he's going to lose that battle, and green will win the overall. So he doesn't want to do that. He just wants to make his attacks on the other players. And I think that's going to form a certain stasis because everybody's got reserve food in place. So we go to the production phase. Before I got into that, I missed the military conflict going on here. This guy had to build another army and pay. He did an attack destroying whatever these French are. They were squatting on his water and moved in the extra army in here onto his prime production spot at this point. These guys are in real trouble, the French there. They just haven't been able to move all game somehow, and I'm not sure why. You look at the English, and they failed for military reasons. This just sort of never coalesced into a productive industry. And, part of it is, I think, the splitting here between the food and the water. It's not terrible, or energy. That's not terrible because energy is fairly cheap. And then buying this extra piece early on, they never gained anything off of it. And they just somehow couldn't make the hump. And we're at the end of production. Some pretty big piles again being made. Just look at all this blue showing up here. And he's got a fairly balanced production with what he's stealing. The black he's stealing. He's also stealing a blue. That was kind of iffy whether or not to produce with this guy. He ends up giving a bigger bonus to someone else. But he kind of wants to clear his promissory note. And doesn't feel like these federal provinces, which I guess is supposed to be Germany, I don't know, as being one of the initial leaders. But I think he's as much a shot as anyone else. Our big farmer here, wow, that's just getting ridiculous. And really, everybody, a lot of people's production is going way through the roof. But some of these productions don't make a lot of money. So, for example, the bank production that he ran brings him $30, but he played a blue, which is, you know, say a net of 17 on the market, and two of these 23. He was impressed with all this effort. Well, the effort, other than getting a tile that's worth 4 victory points, it may not have been worth it, just because it's certainly not for the economic improvements that you get. All right, up this guy.